Have you noticed how the more you post, the less alive you actually feel inside? We live in a time where silence feels suspicious, where presence must be proven, where if you don't announce your vacation, did you really rest? If you don't share your joy, was it ever real? In a digital world where validation is currency and visibility is survival, choosing not to share your life has become the most radical form of power. And yet, have you ever wondered why so many of us feel drained, anxious, or disconnected, despite being seen more than ever before? The truth is subtle but sharp. Every time you post, you give away a piece of your inner world to people who may not cherish it. You offer your energy to an invisible crowd that watches but rarely protects. In the name of staying relevant, we slowly become performers of our own lives, hoping the applause will feel like love. But Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And who you truly are is not content. You are not a brand. You are not a caption. You are a human being with sacred parts of your story that were never meant to be consumed by strangers. Choosing not to post is not weakness. It is not invisibility. It is a quiet act of defiance in a world addicted to exposure. It is an energetic boundary, a declaration that you no longer need to be witnessed to feel worthy, that you no longer need to bleed online to feel alive. It is a conscious return to the self, where your experiences belong to you first, not to an algorithm or audience. The most precious moments of your life should not be filtered for proof, but felt in full. There is a deeper form of confidence that does not shout, a deeper form of joy that does not beg to be photographed, a deeper kind of peace that thrives in privacy. When you step back from the compulsion to be constantly visible, you begin to see clearly. The hunger for attention was never your truth. It was a symptom of forgetting your own enoughness. In a world that measures you by your likes, views, and reach, not needing any of it is the real power. It's a return to inner authority, a reclamation of presence, and above all, it's a reminder that the most meaningful parts of your life do not need to be announced. They just need to be lived, quietly, fully, and without permission. Now ask yourself, what would it feel like to live without broadcasting? Who might you become if no one was watching? That's where we begin. Why do people only seem to notice your value once you've gone quiet? In the age of constant availability, something strange has happened. Our presence has become forgettable. When you're always online, always updating, always reacting, people stop seeing you. You're no longer a person. They reduce you to a presence, a stream of content, a digital hum in the background of their overstimulated world. But when you withdraw, when you become rare, everything about you begins to feel sacred again. People lean in, they pay attention, they ask questions. Why? Because silence has gravity. Rarity creates reverence. In real life, think about the friend who doesn't post anything for months. When they do, their voice cuts through the noise. It lands differently. It feels intentional, deliberate, and somehow more alive. Or think of a loved one you haven't heard from in years, and suddenly a letter arrives. Just a few handwritten lines. But those few lines carry more intimacy, more soul than 100 online messages combined. Why is that? Because the less access people have to you, the more their minds wander. And the wandering mind, as Jung said, is the birthplace of myth, longing, and projection. Carl Jung taught that we are always projecting onto the other. The less we know about someone, the more we fill in the gaps with our imagination, our hope, our fear. In this way, rarity doesn't just make you valuable, it makes you symbolic. You become a mirror of their curiosity, not just a performer of your identity. When you're rare, your presence becomes archetypal. It stops being casual, it becomes eventful, your energy lingers. But when you're always available, when every meal, every smile, every trip, every thought is displayed, people stop feeling you. You lose dimensionality. You become predictable. And predictability is the slow death of attraction, mystery, reverence. Have you ever wondered why some of your most liked posts still left you feeling unseen? Because engagement is not intimacy. It is exposure, and what is constantly exposed loses its sacredness. This is not a call to disappear. It's a call to reclaim your presence, to let silence become part of your identity, to let people miss you before they dismiss you. When you give people everything, they value nothing, but when you offer your essence with care, you stop being entertainment and start being remembered. So ask yourself honestly, do you want to be seen or do you want to be valued? Do you want to be consumed or do you want to be felt? You do not have to be everywhere to matter. You do not have to speak constantly to be heard. Your life does not need to be an open tab for strangers to browse. The truth is, you become unforgettable the moment you stop trying to be constantly remembered, not because you are louder, but because you are realer, calmer, less accessible, more you. Let your silence be your aura. Let your absence speak. Let your mystery restore. The soul that overexposure has drained. In a world hungry for the next post, the next glimpse, the next distraction, be the person who makes space feel sacred again. Have you ever felt like your life only mattered once it was seen by others? Somewhere along the way, without realizing it, we stopped living for meaning and started living for proof. Not proof for ourselves, but proof for the invisible audience we've created. You know the feeling. You take a photo, not because the moment moved you, but because you know it will move others. You laugh, but your eyes scan for the camera. You experience something powerful, grief, beauty, love, but instead of sitting with it, you think, how will I share this? This isn't just habit, it's a psychological loop that slowly robs life of its intimacy. The most sacred moments become performances. You don't cry to release. You cry to be validated. You don't rest to restore. You rest so you can post about healing. You don't even know who you are without the need to be witnessed. At first, it seems harmless, but over time, it becomes a deep emotional fracture. You begin to lose the boundary between experience and exhibition. You start curating your identity based on what gains approval. You become more image than soul. And what's most dangerous? You may appear more alive than ever, while quietly dying inside. Dying from the pressure to be constantly interesting. Dying from the fear that if you don't prove your life, no one will remember you lived. Carl Jung warned of this psychological fragmentation. He spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to fit the world. And while we all wear masks, the danger comes when we mistake the mask for the self. Social media has turned the mask into our mirror. We no longer ask, do I feel alive? We ask, do I look alive? And in doing so, we hand over our inner truth for outer applause. So what happens when you stop? When you no longer prove your laughter, your love, your lunch, your success, your worth? At first, it's uncomfortable, like a withdrawal. You may feel invisible, disconnected, even unimportant. But slowly, the inner voice returns. You begin noticing things not because they are photogenic, but because they are soul-nourishing. You watch the rain fall and feel it rather than film it. You listen to music that no one else will hear you play. You cook not for aesthetics, but because the flavors remind you of someone you love. These are not content. These are moments. They belong only to you. That is what Jung called psychological freedom, the sacred return to the self. The moment when your reality no longer depends on how it is received. The moment you realize your existence doesn't need documentation to be meaningful. So let me ask you something raw. What if you didn't take the photo? What if no one knew you were there? What if you lived fully, quietly, without proof, and it was still enough? This is not about judgment. It's about healing. It's about reclaiming the moments the world taught you to monetize. It's about remembering that some things are too beautiful, too real, too sacred to share. They are meant to live in your bones, not your feed. Because the real proof is not in what the world sees, it's in what you feel. And if you feel peace, presence, joy, or even honest pain, you don't need likes to validate it. You lived it, and that's more than enough. Have you ever wondered why the most meaningful parts of your life often lose their magic once you share them too soon? There's a strange ache many people feel after they open up online. At first, it feels like connection. You get the likes, the hearts, the replies. But later, something subtle shifts. You begin to feel exposed, misunderstood, even invaded. Suddenly, your joy isn't just yours. Your struggle isn't sacred. It's become content. And worse, it has invited the projections, opinions, and silent critiques of people who don't actually care for your well-being. This is one of the quiet costs of visibility that no one talks about. When you share something publicly, you don't just offer your truth. You offer it to be interpreted, misread, judged, or consumed by people who may carry their own shadows into the conversation. And often, what they reflect back is not about you, it's about them. Their envy, their control, their loneliness, their fear. Carl Jung called this projection, and it happens most when people have not done their own inner work. They will twist your happiness into arrogance, your grief into attention-seeking, your silence into punishment, your love into weakness, all because they cannot meet you without filtering it through their own unresolved pain. So what do? You begin by remembering that silence is not emptiness. Silence is sacred. Silence is where intimacy breathes. When you stop feeding the internet the details of your heart, your marriage, your child's smile, your spiritual awakening, your quiet battles, something unexpected happens. Peace returns. Not because life becomes easier, but because fewer people are invited to shape your narrative. It's not just about keeping secrets. It's about protecting what is real. Real love, real growth, real healing. These things flourish in safety, not in spectacle. When too many eyes are watching, even the truest things begin to wither under pressure. And when the noise fades, you begin to hear who is truly with you. Because the ones who matter won't need to scroll your timeline to know how you're doing. They'll ask, they'll call, they'll feel you. This is the paradox of modern connection. The more you share, the more invisible you become. Not because people stop noticing you, but because they start reducing you. You become entertainment, background noise, a projection. But when you withhold, when you become selective, intentional, quiet, your presence regains power. People pay attention, not out of entitlement, but because mystery has returned. The energy that once leaked out through oversharing now gathers inward. And with that gathering, you begin to remember yourself. Jung often emphasized the need to withdraw from collective opinion in order to individuate, to become whole. That withdrawal is not about isolation, it is about discernment. It is the act of deciding who gets access to your inner world and who does not. Who has earned the right to see behind the curtain and who only wants a glimpse to gossip, compete, or control. When you no longer feel the need to explain your joy, defend your peace, or post your progress, you've reclaimed your center. So let me ask you, what parts of your life are sacred enough to protect? What relationships feel more alive when they're nurtured in private? What truths begin to feel more real when no one else is watching? Your silence is not withdrawal. It is wisdom. It is the soil where your peace roots deeply and grows strong enough to hold you when no one claps, no one watches, and no one reacts. Because not everything beautiful was meant to be seen. Some things are meant to be felt. And the more you honor that, the more real your life becomes, not for the world, but for you. When was the last time you did something meaningful without telling a soul, just because it mattered to you? There is a quiet identity crisis that surfaces when we stop performing. At first, it feels like absence. No one claps, no one sees, no one validates your effort. And it can feel strangely empty. Because for years, we've been taught to live in front of an audience. Even our most private choices are filtered through the question, who will see this? Who will be impressed? Who will approve? But slowly, if you sit with that emptiness, something extraordinary begins to emerge. You realize the emptiness was not the absence of meaning. It was the absence of performance. And without performance, your inner world finally has space to breathe. Carl Jung called this the shift from persona to self. The persona is the mask we wear in public. It is the version of us designed to be liked, admired, approved of. But it is not the whole truth. And when we live too long in the mask, we forget who we are beneath it. We begin to crave attention more than peace. We start chasing applause instead of alignment. And eventually, our identity fractures under the pressure of always being seen. This is the hidden exhaustion of visibility, the constant need to be perceived, the subtle anxiety that you must keep proving your worth to stay relevant, the pressure to show that you're evolving, succeeding, smiling, thriving, and the silent grief that follows when no one notices you're not okay, even after all your posts. But healing begins the moment you realize you don't need an audience to exist. You don't need feedback to feel real. You don't need applause to be worthy. And when that realization takes root, it reorders your entire life. You begin making choices based on values, not validation. You spend your time differently. You notice things again, the scent of rain, the rhythm of your breath, the warmth in a loved one's eyes, not because it would make a great photo, but because it touches your soul. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming whole within yourself. No longer fragmented by the projections of others, no longer defined by what gains traction or visibility. You reclaim your energy. You return to what is truly yours. Your morning rituals, your private breakthroughs, your quiet grief, your spontaneous laughter. These sacred moments are not less valuable because they are unseen. In fact, they are more. So what happens when you no longer perform? You begin to notice the subtle, sacred things that only the soul can recognize. The way peace settles into your bones when you don't owe anyone an explanation. The way clarity arrives when no one is watching. The way power returns when you no longer ask the world for permission to exist. And something even deeper happens. You become trustworthy to yourself. You stop abandoning your needs to be liked. You stop betraying your intuition to stay visible. You start walking differently. Not faster, not louder, but more true. And that kind of truth is rare. We often believe the goal is to be seen. But what if the real goal is to be whole? What if your worth has nothing to do with how many people are watching? What if your most profound transformation happens in silence, in solitude, in the invisible realms of the heart? So let me ask you this. If no one ever knew what you were healing from, what you were building, what you were dreaming of, would you still do it? Because if the answer is yes, then you've found your freedom. Not in applause, not in followers, but in the quiet, knowing that you belong to yourself again. If no one ever saw what you did, who would you become? Imagine this. The internet disappears tonight, every account erased, no one to like your progress, no stories to post, no comments to validate your joy or your sadness, just silence. Would you still wake up tomorrow with purpose? Would you still dance when music plays? Would you still write the poem, take the photo, say the prayer, cook the meal, plant the seed? This is not a doomsday scenario. It is a spiritual exercise, because somewhere along the line, our lives became performances, quietly curated for viewership. We don't just live anymore. We document, we perform, we wait to be witnessed, and in doing so, we sometimes lose sight of what is ours, untouched by the gaze of others. Carl Jung believed that the most authentic parts of the self are often hidden from the world, not because they are weak, but because they are sacred. The outer self is a projection, a mask. But the inner self, the one that dreams in solitude, that cries without being comforted, that feels beauty no one sees, that self is real, that self is whole, and the soul remembers it even when the world forgets. There is a certain power in protecting your sacred interior, a certain holiness in keeping some things untouched by performance. The way you hold your child's hand when no one is watching, the quiet joy of sipping tea in the morning light, the courage it takes to grieve without posting it, the decision to begin again not for an audience, but for your own rebirth. These moments are not less significant because they are unseen. They are more. In a world that equates existence with visibility, privacy becomes an act of rebellion, and more than that, it becomes an act of preservation. Because not everything real needs to be shared, not everything beautiful needs to be displayed. Some things become distorted when too many eyes touch them, and some things only survive when kept in the quiet. Jung warned of this fragmentation. When we outsource our identity to other people's perception, we split from ourselves. We become what gets praised. We abandon what is ignored. We seek the mirror instead of the meaning. And in doing so, we turn away from the innermost sanctum of our being, the place where intuition lives, where calling whispers, where the deepest truths are born in silence. But what if your life did not need to be proven to be meaningful? What if the parts of you that no one sees are the parts that matter most? Your integrity, your tenderness, your small, consistent kindness, your discipline in the dark, your dreams that no one claps for. Could those be the truest signs of who you are becoming? Ask yourself, would I still love the way I do if it was never acknowledged? Would I still create if no one saw the result? Would I still choose healing, knowing no one might ever understand how hard it was? Because if the answer is yes, then you have arrived at something priceless, inner wholeness, not driven by performance, not fragmented by exposure, but rooted in something eternal and quietly powerful, the self that does not require witnesses to feel real. So let the world scroll, let the noise roar, let others share what they must. But you, remember the sacredness of the unseen. Remember that some of your greatest growth will never be captured, that your highest peace might come in a moment no one will ever know about, that your most honest joy might bloom in the dark like a flower that opens not to be admired, but because it was time. You are not here to be watched. You are here to become. And becoming does not need an audience. It needs truth, silence, solitude, and the quiet courage to keep choosing the path no one claps for simply because it is yours. So, if everything went dark tonight, would you still know who you are? If you would, then nothing can ever take that from you. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.